future Earth alignments and date anomalies. There is a very strange coincidence with the body Elenin with respect to the date it reaches perigee, the end of its elliptical orbit and the closest distance to the Sun. The day this will occur, according to NASA's trajectory estimations, is September 11, 2011, exactly the day of the 10th year anniversary of 9/11. The events of 9/11 are beyond the scope of this presentation, but this does ask the question, how much does the government know, and why aren't we being told? The next Earth alignment will occur on September 27, 2011 with Elenin almost half distance between the Sun and the Earth. This time Elenin and the Sun will be affecting Earth from the same direction, and there is no precedent for the severity of this event. One can speculate, however, based on the previous alignments and the fact that the effects are multiplied by the distance of Elenin, there will be a large pole shift, perhaps miles of axis shift instead of mere centimeters as seen in the past too. Finally, 5 months after Judgment Day on October 21, 2011, the Earth will pass through the tail region of Elenin and become bombarded with debris, some of which were gravitationally attracted to Elenin as it passed through the asteroid belt. This offers one scenario that explains how the world will be destroyed 5 months after Judgment Day. Prophecies of Revelation and Hopi. If Judgment Day is just a few weeks away, then where are the prophecies of Revelation, and why have they not occurred yet? The truth is that many of these prophecies have occurred and will continue to occur in the near future, which can be seen using the information discussed here. 1. The Sun will be turned to darkness, and the Moon to blood before the coming of the great and glorious day of the Lord. Acts 2:20. This image is from the December 21, 2010 total lunar eclipse. Clearly the Moon is tinted the color red, which is what was seen in the Revelation vision. December 21 is also the winter equinox, and 2 years to the day before the end of the Mayan calendar. An Earth anomaly also occurred on this day. Every geological earthquake sensor on planet Earth activated even though there was no great planetary earthquake. In addition to this phenomenon, this day was also the start of the mass bird-fish deaths. This was a great indicator of the start of magnetic fluctuations and seems to be as significant of a sign as the Bible claims. 2. The second angel sounded his trumpet, and something like a huge mountain, all ablaze, was thrown into the sea. A third of the sea turned into blood. Revelation 8:8 close parenthesis. This image is a photograph of the Deepwater Horizon offshore deepwater drilling platform explosion of April 2010. Many people made this connection when the scope of the damage caused by this incident was realized. In truth, BP and the United States government, with the help of the media, covered up a large amount of information about the magnitude of this event. The plan used to rid the Gulf of oil was to use the extremely toxic Corexit 9500 oil dispersant to hide the oil by sinking it to the bottom of the Gulf. The health effects of Corexit 9500 are very potent. In fact, many of the BP cleanup workers who spent days on the beaches north of where crop dusters released the dispersant are now horribly sick with neurological damage and will most likely die because of the dispersant. There are some videos that were available on YouTube where cleanup workers give testimony to their struggle and explain what they are experiencing. BP is also trying to keep secret the massive impact this event has had on the wildlife of the Gulf. There have been testimonies of islands in the Gulf being used as incinerators to burn the carcasses of dead dolphins, birds, fish, and other animal life killed by the chemicals and oil. The picture above accounts for the something like a mountain of fire was thrown into the sea. As for the waters turning to blood, one could interpret this twofold. First, the massive bloodshed of marine life this event has caused, and second, and more likely, the crude oil released. Crude oil is different than the oil used in our vehicles. It is unrefined and, in the case of the oil from the Deepwater incident, the oil was red like blood. This image shows some of the crude oil in the Gulf of Mexico from last year. It is important to remember that when John was receiving the visions of the end of days from the Lord, he was shown that which he could not explain in words using current knowledge. That is to say, in the time of John, there were no oil rigs, so he penned what he was shown. Though he saw what looked like blood flowing in the seas, he could not have possibly known through a vision that the fluid was crude oil, so he described the waters as best he could using knowledge of his time. This is common in many ancient texts of supernatural prophecy. 3. The third angel sounded his trumpet, and a great star, blazing like a torch, fell from the sky on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters turned bitter, and many people died from the waters that had become bitter. Revelation 8:10-11. This event is more speculative, but in relation to modern society it seems to be the only scientific explanation for this passage. This image is of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, which sustained major damage on the third alignment earthquake of March 11. As of today, the situation in Japan will have no fix for 6 to 9 months, which means that 4 crippled reactors will be leaking uranium fission particles into the atmosphere. Because of the jet stream, these particles are not confined to Japan, but are now spreading across the entire northern hemisphere. Though the United States is an ocean away from this accident, it does not mean the country will not see its effects. Radioactive particles have already begun appearing in milk and tap water nationwide, and in response, the country's Environmental Protection Agency, which should be informing the public on the concentrations of radionuclides, has decided instead to raise the acceptable safe limits of these particles for our water supplies. For example, radioactive iodine-131, which collects in the thyroid gland and causes thyroid cancer, is now allowed in our water supplies up to 100,000 times previously safe levels. This was done so the agency and government does not have to inform the public that their water sources are dangerous. All radiation received is cumulative, and continues to build up in the body until a cancer is developed. An analogy I like to use is as follows. Consider an empty bucket that represents a person's body. Every time that person receives a dose of radiation, water is added to the bucket in a quantity relative to the amount of radiation received. When the bucket finally fills up, a cancer is developed in that person. Though half of the iodine-131 decays every 5 days, there are other fission particles that deserve equal attention, some of which do not decay for 30 years, or even thousands of years. In the case of uranium and plutonium, when it rains, these particles, which are airborne traveling eastward across the northern hemisphere, will be dumped down in the rain to the ground. An interesting fact to point out is that schools in South Korea have recently closed just because of this rain. The government has advised anyone who will be in contact with the rain to bring an umbrella, regardless of the size of the storm, as any bit of water is dangerous. Our government, on the other hand, has given no such warning even though the rain in California is roughly 10 times as radioactive as South Korea's. On a personal note, I care very much for your health, so I encourage you to try to avoid contact with the rain, change clothes if they get wet, avoid drinking milk, which now contains radioactive iodine-131, and drink only filtered water, never tap water or unfiltered water from springs. As these particles begin to accumulate in our drinking sources, it would seem, as the Lord states, many people will die from these waters. For anyone doubting that wormwood does not refer to radioactive fission particles, it should be stated that Chernobyl, the nuclear plant in the Ukraine, which was the first to melt down in world history, is Ukrainian for wormwood. Yes, the word Chernobyl in Ukrainian is wormwood. Considering the large number of nuclear plants and the fact that many much larger earthquakes are coming as Nibiru passes through our solar system, we can expect to see more plant failures, thus increasing the rate of groundwater contamination. This image is a photograph of the Hopi Indians' prophecy rock, which was created long ago and gives warning to us, the ones living in these days. It states that mankind had its choice in taking one of two paths when the Eastern and Western world met, one of coexistence or one of destruction that would ultimately lead to a great destruction. As history dictates, our path has been the latter. Because of this choice our ancestors made in violence and greed, the Hopi say that we will be destroyed by fire, which is the same promise the Lord God gives in the Bible. The Hopi Indians held 9 signs that will come to pass before the destruction of the world by fire, 8 of which have already been fulfilled. 1. We are told of the coming of white-skinned men, like Pahana Anunnaki, but not living like Pahana Anunnaki men who took the land that was not theirs, and men who struck their enemies with thunder. This foretells the coming of white men from Europe to America who took the land from the Indians using superior weaponry, guns. 2. Our lands will see the coming of spinning wheels filled with voices. In his youth, my father saw this prophecy come true with his eyes, the white men bringing their families in wagons across the prairies. 3. A strange beast like a buffalo, but with great long horns, will overrun the land in large numbers. These white feather saw with his eyes, the coming of the white men's cattle. 4. The land will be crossed by snakes of iron. This prophecy was fulfilled by the construction of the railroad. 5. The land shall be crisscrossed by a giant spider's web. This prophecy was fulfilled by the construction of telephone poles and the electric grid. 6. The land shall be crisscrossed with rivers of stone that make pictures in the sun. This prophecy was fulfilled by the construction of paved roads and highways. 7. You will hear of the sea turning black, and many living things dying because of it. This prophecy was fulfilled last year by the BP oil event. 8. You will see many youth, who wear their hair long like my people, come and join the tribal nations, to learn their ways and wisdom. The hippie peace movement fulfilled this prophecy. 9. You will hear of a dwelling place in the heavens, above the earth, that shall fall with a great crash. It will appear as a blue star. Very soon after this, the ceremonies of my people will cease. This prophecy has yet to be fulfilled, but I predict that soon the International Space Station will be damaged somehow and fall to the earth with a blue light. This is just my personal opinion. Others suggest this prophecy was already fulfilled, but I leave that to the reader to investigate. Notice that sign 7 of the Hopi is similar to the second trumpet of Revelation, and the method of cleansing is the same in both prophecies. The Hopi legends state that after these signs have come to pass, the world will begin to shake, or pole shift, leading to the destruction of this world and a birth to a new world, just as the Lord promised to destroy this world and create a new heaven and a new earth. Now the evidence of May 21st as Judgment Day. This date has been realized and popularized by the biblical teacher and radio host Harold Camping. Through study of the scriptures, he has singled out this date as the day of the return of Christ, the day when the dead will be resurrected, and those who have belonged to Christ, who are still living, will be ascended to heaven and spared from the 5 months of judgment. He has arrived at this date using the Bible as a calendar. The full explanation and arrival at the date May 21, 2011 can be examined online at http://www.ebiblefellowship.com/May-1/ The word of one man alone would not be enough to persuade me to believe in this date, nor should it any of you. But I came into knowledge of this date from a different source, from a physical scientific analysis before even hearing of Harold Camping's prediction. Our government is preparing for something big. FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, has secretly been preparing for a major disaster for years. Under the presidency of George W. Bush, the federal government began construction of FEMA camps. These facilities are top secret, yet open in plain sight, empty concentration camp-like areas designed to keep the public contained safe in the event of an emergency. I encourage you to search for the video of the camp, containing thousands of black coffins, large enough to contain at least 5 adult bodies each. This photo was taken from that video and shows the coffins stacked around the perimeter of the facility. On January 20, 2011, FEMA put out a contract to purchase pre-packed commercial meals in support of disaster relief efforts based on a catastrophic disaster event within the New Madrid fault system for a survivor population of 7 million to be utilized for the sustainment of life during a 10-day period of operations. FEMA document. FEMA also put out a bid for blankets and body bags for this disaster, which has yet to occur.